The coffee was cold. I noticed that first, before the whisper that rippled through the cabin, before the jets appeared outside the window, before everything I'd buried for 6 years came roaring back to life at 35,000 feet.
My name is Alex Brennan. At least, that's what my driver's license says. That's what the barista writes on my cup every morning. That's the name on the lease for my tiny apartment in Portland, where I work as a freelance graphic designer, and pretend I've never flown anything more dangerous than a commercial flight to visit my sister.
But 6 years ago, my name was Captain Alexandra Reaper Brennan, United States Air Force, lead test pilot for the most classified aviation program in American military history. And 6 years ago, according to every official record, I died in a training accident that never happened, flying an aircraft that officially doesn't exist. Today, sitting in seat 12C of United Flight 447 from Denver to Seattle, wearing jeans and an old college hoodie, carrying nothing but a backpack with a change of clothes and a dog tag I should have thrown away years ago. Today, that past just caught up with me. It started with the whisper, row by row, like a wave moving through the cabin. Did you hear that? What did the captain say? Is something wrong with the radios? I'd been half asleep, trying not to think about the job interview waiting for me in Seattle, trying not to notice the way the engine sounded slightly off rhythm, trying not to be the person I used to be. But the moment that whisper started, every instinct I'd spent 6 years suppressing snapped awake. I listened. Not the way normal passengers listen, with half attention and mild concern. I listened the way I'd been trained to listen, filtering through the ambient noise of crying babies and overhead air vents and muted conversations, until I found it. A voice on the flight deck radio, young and strained, bleeding through the intercom system in fragments. Fuel critical, losing hydraulic pressure, can't maintain formation. My hand tightened around the paper cup. Cold coffee sloshed onto my fingers. I didn't feel it. Because I knew that voice. Not the specific person, but the type, the cadence, the particular flavor of fear that comes when a pilot realizes they're about to die and there's nothing their training can do to stop it. The businessman next to me, mid-50s, expensive suit, hadn't looked up from his laptop since boarding, finally noticed something was wrong. "Hey, you hear that?" he asked, frowning. "Sounds like—" He stopped talking, because that's when the jets appeared. 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons, emerging from the cloud bank like ghosts made of titanium and threat. They slid into formation alongside our aircraft with the kind of precision that takes thousands of hours to master, positioning themselves so close I could see the rivets on their fuselages. The cabin erupted in murmurs. Phones came out. People pressed against windows. A kid 3 rows up said, "Cool," with the kind of excitement that comes from not understanding danger yet. But I was watching something else, something nobody else on this plane would notice. The way the left F-16, the one closest to us, was flying. The nose kept dipping and correcting, tiny movements, barely perceptible, but wrong. The kind of wrong that precedes disaster. And then the lead F-16 pilot did something that made my blood run cold. He dipped his wing, just slightly, just enough. It was a distress signal, the kind pilots use when their radios are compromised and they need to communicate visually. The kind that says, "We have a serious problem and we need help now." The businessman was still talking, something about air shows and routine escorts, his voice carrying that forced casualness people use when they're scared but don't want to admit it. Other passengers were recording videos, laughing nervously, speculating about what was happening. None of them understood. None of them could see what I saw. That young pilot, whoever he was, had maybe minutes before his aircraft became uncontrollable. And when an F-16 loses control this close to a commercial aircraft carrying 200 civilians, disaster stops being a strong enough word. I sat perfectly still, feeling 6 years of carefully constructed normalcy cracking apart around me. I'd walked away from this world. I'd varied my call sign, changed my name, learned to sleep without dreaming of cockpits and combat and the sound of alarms that meant someone wasn't coming home. I'd promised myself I'd never go back. And then the radio crackled again, louder this time, the voice younger and more desperate. "Viper lead, this is Viper 2. I'm losing her. Stick's fighting me. Fuel state critical." The flight attendant walking past me, blonde, maybe 25, with the kind of smile that's 90% training and 10% genuine, paused when she saw my face. "Ma'am, are you all right? You look—" "I need to speak to your captain," I said. My voice came out different than I intended, harder, flatter, the voice I used to use when lives depended on people following my instructions without question. She blinked. "I'm sorry, but passengers aren't allowed." "Those jets outside aren't escorting us," I interrupted. "They're in trouble, serious trouble. And unless your captain understands tactical aviation at a level I'm guessing he doesn't, everyone on this plane is about to have a very bad day." Her professional smile faltered. "Ma'am, I assure you that—" I reached into my backpack, moving slowly so I wouldn't alarm her, and pulled out the one thing I'd kept from my old life. The thing I told myself I carried for sentimental reasons, not because some part of me always knew this day might come. A dog tag, silver, worn smooth at the edges from years against a flight suit, and on it, engraved in letters that had never faded, Capt. A. Brennan, Reaper, USAF. Below the name, a small symbol most people wouldn't recognize, but she did. Her eyes went wide. Those are pilot wings," she whispered. "The special ones, the ones they only give to—" "Test pilots," I finished. "Experimental aviation. The kind that doesn't make it into recruitment videos." I met her eyes. "I used to fly with crews like the ones outside. I know what that wing dip means. I know what that voice on your radio is telling you. And I know that we're running out of time." She stared at me for 3 long seconds. Then she turned and walked toward the cockpit, moving fast. The businessman finally looked at me, really looked. "You're military?" "Used to be." "What kind of pilot?" "The kind that flew things you've never heard of." I turned back to the window. The F-16 was getting worse. The oscillations were more pronounced now. Whoever was flying it was fighting for control and losing. Behind me, I could hear other passengers starting to piece together that something was wrong. The nervous laughter had stopped. Conversations were dropping to whispers. A mother pulled her daughter closer. An older man with a Vietnam vet cap caught my eye and gave me a slight nod. Recognition from one warrior to another, across generations and genders, and all the years between. The flight attendant returned, her professional composure cracking. "The captain says he's been told by air traffic control to maintain course in altitude, that military operations will handle." "Military operations are failing," I said quietly. "That pilot out there, he's dying, and when his aircraft goes down, it might take us with it." I stood up. "I need to talk to your captain, now." He said, "I don't care what he said." I moved past her into the aisle, not aggressively, but with the kind of certainty that comes from 6 years of telling people what to do in crisis situations and having them obey because the alternative was death. Either you let me through that door or you explain to the NTSB why you stopped the only person on this plane who might be able to prevent a mid-air collision. She hesitated for only a moment. Then she led me forward. Every eye in the cabin followed us. I could feel their questions, their fear, their confusion. Who was I? What was happening? Why was a woman in a hoodie walking to the cockpit like she owned the aircraft? Let them wonder. I had more important things to worry about. The cockpit door opened 6 inches. The captain's face appeared, late 50s, graying at the temples, with the kind of weathered calm that comes from 20,000 hours in the left seat. But his eyes betrayed him. He was scared. I don't know who you are, he said, but passengers aren't allowed. I held up the dog tag, let him see the wings, let him read the inscription. His expression changed. Your Air Force? Was. Test pilot, Experimental Aviation Division. And right now, I am the only person on this plane who knows what's really happening outside. He studied my face. Behind him, I could see his co-pilot, younger, maybe early 30s, gripping the controls with white knuckles. Through the windshield, the damaged F-16 was clearly visible, close enough that I could see the pilot's helmet through the canopy. Too close. Way too close. Captain, I said quietly, that fighter is in a hydraulic failure spiral. The pilot's fighting phantom roll, which means his flight control computer is giving him bad inputs. He's got maybe 3 minutes before he loses control completely. And when he does, the aircraft's trajectory is going to bring it directly into our flight path. The captain's jaw tightened. How do you know that? Because I've flown in that situation. I've trained pilots through that situation. And I've watched good people die in that situation when nobody intervened in time. I met his eyes. Let me help him. Please. For a long moment, he didn't move. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Regulations versus instinct. Protocol versus survival. The rule book versus the reality of 200 lives depending on his next decision. Then he stepped aside. Get in here. I slipped through the door. It closed behind me, sealing me into a space that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The smell of avionics and recycled air, the glow of instruments, the infinite sky ahead, beautiful and indifferent to human life. Ma'am, the co-pilot said, voice tight, what exactly are you planning to... He stopped, because that's when the radio crackled again and a new voice came through, older, calmer. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd been flying combat missions since before I was born. United 447, this is Thunder Lead. Be advised we have a critical situation developing. Viper 2 has lost primary hydraulics and is no longer combat effective. He's attempting to maintain formation, but he's not going to make it much longer.
The captain grabbed the radio. Thunder Lead, this is United 447. We are a commercial aircraft with 200 souls on board. We need immediate... I know what you need, the voice interrupted, but I don't have the authority to order that fighter to break formation, and until he breaks or crashes, you're stuck with him. Then who does have authority? The captain demanded. Silence on the radio, long enough that I knew the answer before anyone said it.
Nobody did, because the person who used to have that authority, the one who'd flown with Thunder Lead 100 times, who trained half the pilots in this sky, who'd once been trusted with the most advanced aircraft America had ever built, that person was officially dead. I reached forward and took the radio from the captain's hand. He didn't stop me. I keyed the mic. Let 6 years of silence end with 4 words I never thought I'd say again. Thunder Lead, this is Reaper. The cockpit went absolutely still. The radio stayed silent for 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then Thunder Lead's voice came back, so quiet I barely heard it. Reaper, but you're... I know what I am, I said, and right now I'm the only person who can save that kid. Patch me through to Viper 2. Now. Reaper, if this is really you, God, it's good to hear your voice. Stand by. The radio clicked. Static. Then a young voice, shaking with effort. Viper 2, who is this? I took a breath. Let the old training take over. Let myself become the person I'd been before I walked away. Viper 2, this is Captain Brennan. Call sign Reaper. Listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. And just like that, I was back. Whether I wanted to be or not. The question was, would it be enough? Viper 2, listen to my voice, I said, keeping my tone level and controlled.
My name is Captain Alexandra Brennan. You don't know me, but I flew experimental combat aircraft for 8 years before you ever touched a stick. Right now, you're experiencing phantom roll caused by hydraulic pressure loss in your flight control system. Your aircraft is lying to you. Do you understand?
The young pilot's breathing came through ragged and fast. How do you... Focus, I cut him off. I don't have time to explain my resume. Your nose is tipping left every 4 seconds. You're overcorrecting right. That's making it worse. Stop fighting the aircraft. I can't. If I don't correct, I'll roll into the airliner.
No, you won't. Your control surfaces are creating the problem. Every time you input right stick, the aircraft translates it wrong and pushes you harder left. You're in a feedback loop. I watched through the cockpit window as the F-16 shuddered again, its nose dipping dangerously close to our wing. Here's what you're going to do. On my mark, you're going to let go of the stick completely for 3 seconds. Let the aircraft stabilize itself.
That's insane! That's physics. Your flight computer is trying to compensate for damage you don't know you have. If you stop giving it input, it'll find neutral. 3 seconds. That's all I need. The captain beside me whispered, "Is that really going to work?"
It worked for me, I said quietly. 6 years ago. Different aircraft, same problem. I keyed the mic again. Viper 2, I need you to trust me. I know you're scared. I know every instinct is telling you to hold that stick. But I've been exactly where you are, and I'm still alive because I did what I'm telling you to do now.
Thunder Lead's voice broke in. Reaper, if you're wrong about this, then I'm wrong. But if he keeps fighting the aircraft, he's dead in 90 seconds anyway. We've got nothing to lose. I paused. Thunder, you remember the Dark Star incident? Nevada, 2018? A sharp intake of breath. You were the pilot? I was the pilot. Same hydraulic failure, same phantom roll. I let go, and the aircraft found its balance. I looked at the F-16 through the windshield. It was getting worse. Viper 2, we're out of time. 3 seconds. On my mark. Ready?
I can't. You can. I'm going to count you through it. When I say mark, release the stick. Don't think, don't second guess, just do it. I took a breath. 3, 2, 1, mark. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The F-16 continued its sickening oscillation. Then, suddenly, the pilot let go.
The aircraft dipped hard left. Everyone in the cockpit gasped, and for one terrible second, I thought I'd been wrong. Thought I'd just killed a young pilot and doomed everyone on this plane. Then the F-16's nose came up, smoothly, naturally. The oscillation stopped. The aircraft leveled out, holding position like it had never been in trouble at all. The cockpit erupted. The co-pilot let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. The captain's hands were shaking on the controls. Thunder Lead's voice came through, thick with emotion. Viper 2? Status? I'm stable. The young pilot sounded like he couldn't believe it. Controls are responding. The feedback's gone. I'm stable.
Good, I said. Now listen carefully. You've still got hydraulic damage. You're stable, but you're not fixed. I need you to reduce throttle by 15%, increase your altitude by 500 feet, and widen your formation spacing. You're going to fly this bird home, but you're going to do it my way. Understood?
Yes, ma'am. Understood. He paused. Ma'am, who are you? I looked at Thunder Lead's A-10 Warthog, holding position above us like a guardian angel made of titanium and GAU-8 cannon. I could see the faded paint on its nose, the same paint that had been there 8 years ago when I'd flown beside it in combat. The same pilot who'd once pulled me out of enemy airspace when my fuel ran dry and my radios died.
I'm someone who used to do this for a living, I said quietly. Now execute those instructions. Thunder, maintain overwatch. I'll stay on this frequency until... That's when the alarms started. Not on the F-16, not on Thunder's A-10, on the commercial aircraft I was sitting in. The captain's instrument panel lit up like a Christmas tree. Red lights, warning tones, the synthetic voice of the aircraft's computer calmly announcing, "Traffic alert. Traffic alert. Collision warning." What the hell? The co-pilot leaned forward, scanning the displays. "We've got 3 new contacts, fast movers, no transponders, coming in from, Jesus, they're coming straight at us." I moved to the windshield, looking up through the angle of glass. At first, I saw nothing, just blue sky and wisps of cloud. Then I saw them, 3 aircraft, black as midnight, moving in perfect formation. No markings, no identification, flying in a way that made every hair on my neck stand up, because I recognized that pattern, that precision, that inhuman perfection of movement. They weren't being flown by pilots. They were drones, but not any drones I'd seen in the last 6 years. These moved like the ones I'd helped develop before I disappeared, the ones from Project Shadow Strike, the classified program that was supposed to revolutionize aerial combat by teaching AI systems to fly like human aces. The ones we'd shut down when they started making decisions we didn't program them to make. The ones that weren't supposed to exist anymore. Thunderlead's voice cracked through the radio, urgent and confused. "Reaper, please tell me you're seeing this." "I'm seeing it." "What are they?"
Ghosts, I whispered, then louder. "Everyone, break formation. Now, get away from the airliner. We can't leave you unprotected." "They're not here for the airliner," I said, my voice hollow. "They're here for me." The captain turned in his seat, staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. "What?" I pulled the dog tag from around my neck, held it up. In the dim cockpit light, I could see the small chip embedded in the metal, the one I'd forgotten about, the one that was supposed to be deactivated when I died, the one that was glowing faintly now, pulsing with a soft blue light. 6 years ago, I said quietly, I was declared dead after a classified aviation incident. But before that happened, I was the lead pilot on a program called Shadow Strike. We trained AI drones to think like fighter pilots, to predict human tactics, to learn from the best aviators in the world and become better than them. The co-pilot's face had gone pale. "You're saying those things out there are—" "They're hunting me," I finished. "Someone reactivated the program. Someone turned my teaching protocols into kill orders." I looked at the glowing chip, and they're using my own flight signature to track me. One of the black drones peeled away from formation and dove toward us. It moved faster than anything I'd ever seen, crossing 2,000 feet in seconds. Thunderlead tried to intercept, his A-10 dropping into its path, but the drone adjusted its trajectory mid-flight with reflexes no human could match. It slipped past him like water flowing around stone. "Evasive!" I shouted. The captain didn't hesitate. He threw the commercial aircraft into a bank that made passengers scream and overhead bins pop open. Coffee cups and phones and tablets flew through the cabin. Emergency oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The drone screamed past our left wing, missing by less than 20 feet. "It's coming around," the co-pilot said, voice shaking. "It's coming around for another pass." I looked at the dog tag in my hand, at the chip glowing brighter now. They were locked on to this signal. As long as I stayed on this plane, everyone aboard was a target. The decision formed in my mind before I could talk myself out of it. "Captain," I said, "I need you to depressurize the cabin." He stared at me. "Are you insane?" "Those drones are programmed to follow my signature. If I'm not on this plane anymore, they'll break off pursuit." "Not on this plane?" The co-pilot's voice pitched higher. "What are you planning to—" "There's a maintenance access hatch in the rear of the aircraft," I said. "Emergency egress point. Opens manually. If I can get to it—" "You'll fall 35,000 feet," the captain said flatly. "Not if I take a parachute.
I turned to face him fully. You have emergency chutes, crew survival gear. I've used them before. That gear hasn't been inspected and it'll work. I met his eyes. And it's the only way to keep everyone on this plane alive. Those things out there, they're not going to stop. They're not going to give up. They'll follow us all the way to Seattle if they have to, and eventually they'll stop missing. Is that what you want? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his co-pilot, then at the instruments, then back at me. Thunder Lead's voice cut through the silence. Reaper, I hope you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Thunder, you know me. What do you think I'm thinking? A long pause. Then, quietly, God damn it, Alex. It was the first time he'd used my real name in years. Maybe the first time anyone had in years. If I do this, he continued, if I give you cover for this absolutely insane plan, you better make it count. You better survive. Because I didn't spend 8 years flying with the best pilot I ever knew just to watch her throw herself out of an airplane for nothing. Copy that, I said. My throat was tight. Fiber 2, you get yourself home safe. That's an order. Ma'am? The young pilot's voice cracked. Thank you for saving my life. Thank me by living long enough to train the next generation better than I trained you. I turned to the captain. How long until we reach the hatch? 30 seconds if you move fast. He reached under his seat and pulled out a small duffel bag. Chutes in here. Backup oxygen, emergency beacon, the works. Standard crew bailout kit. I took the bag. It was heavier than I expected. Or maybe I was just weaker than I used to be. 6 years of civilian life had made me soft. Time to remember what hard felt like. One more thing, the captain said. He pulled a small laminated card from his shirt pocket and handed it to me. On it was a frequency number and a call sign I didn't recognize. When you land, if you land, contact this frequency. Ask for Cardinal. Tell them Reaper's back. They'll know what it means. I studied his face. Who are you? Someone who used to fly the same kind of missions you did, before I got old and smart enough to fly Marshall. He smiled, sad and knowing. Some of us got out, some of us didn't. Looks like you're about to find out which kind you are. I nodded, grabbed the duffel, turned toward the door. The co-pilot called after me. Hey, what do we tell the passengers? Tell them turbulence is going to get bad. Tell them to buckle up and pray. I paused at the door, one hand on the handle, and tell them that somewhere up here there was a woman who decided their lives were worth more than hers. Then I stepped through into the cabin. The scene was chaos. Passengers gripping armrests, kids crying, flight attendants trying desperately to restore order. When they saw me moving toward the back, carrying a duffel bag, several people shouted questions I didn't answer. The blonde flight attendant from earlier blocked my path near row 22. Ma'am, you need to return to your seat. The captain said. The captain knows exactly what I'm doing, I said. And if you want everyone on this plane to survive the next 10 minutes, you'll let me pass. Something in my voice, in my eyes, made her step aside. I reached the rear galley, found the maintenance hatch exactly where I knew it would be, because I'd studied commercial aircraft emergency egress procedures 8 years ago during cross-training, and some things you never forget. The black drones were circling outside. I could see them through the small windows, predators waiting for their prey to stop running. I pulled the emergency manual release. Alarms screamed, the hatch unsealed with a hiss of escaping pressure. Wind roared into the cabin. The suction was immediate and violent. Plastic cups and magazines and loose papers flew toward the opening, like metal toward a magnet. I pulled on the parachute harness, checked the ripcord twice, and clipped the emergency oxygen mask to my face. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from 6 years of being someone else finally dropping away. Thunderlead's voice crackled in my ear through the emergency radio I'd grabbed from the cockpit. Alex, tell me you've got a plan for after you jump. Working on it, I said. That's not a plan. It's the best I've got. I stood at the edge of the hatch. Below me, Nothing but sky and clouds, and the distant brown-green patchwork of Earth so far down it looked painted. This was insane. I knew it was insane. Every bit of training, every safety protocol, every rational thought in my head was screaming that this was suicide. But those drones weren't going to stop, and 200 innocent people were going to die if I didn't do something equally insane. I pulled the dog tag from my neck one more time, looked at the glowing chip, felt its weight in my palm. "Come get me," I whispered. Then I jumped. The world became wind and noise and acceleration. The aircraft screamed past above me, already pulling away. I fell, tumbling, the ground spinning in lazy circles below. 5 seconds. 10. 15. I pulled the ripcord. The parachute deployed with a bone-jarring snap that felt like being grabbed by a giant hand. My descent slowed. Stabilized. I hung in the harness, suspended between earth and sky, breathing hard through the oxygen mask.
Above me, the 3 black drones had abandoned the aircraft, just like I'd hoped, just like I'd feared. They were coming for me now. All 3 of them dove in perfect synchronization, moving like arrows shot from the same bow. They closed the distance faster than I could track. This was it. The moment where my plan ended and improvisation began. The moment where 6 years of hiding stopped mattering and only survival counted.
Thunderlead's A-10 Warthog screamed past me in a dive, so steep it looked like controlled falling. His 30-millimeter cannon roared, brrr, the sound of God's own chainsaw tearing the sky apart. Tracers lit up the air between us and the drones. One of the black aircraft broke off. The other 2 kept coming. "Alex!" Thunder shouted. "I can't stop them all." "I know!" I shouted back. The lead drone closed to within 100 feet. I could see the sensor pods tracking me, could see the weapons pylons, could see my own death approaching at 400 knots. And then something inside me, something I thought I'd buried 6 years ago, woke up and remembered what it felt like to fight. I grabbed the parachute risers and pulled hard right, throwing myself into a spiral. The drone overshot, its targeting system confused by the sudden maneuver. It pulled up, adjusting, preparing for another pass. But now I had distance, and distance meant time, and time meant options. I reached into the duffel bag still strapped to my chest, past the emergency beacon, past the survival radio, to the thing I'd noticed when I first grabbed the bag but hadn't fully processed until now, a flare gun. Not standard equipment and civilian bailout kits, not even close, which meant the captain had put it there deliberately, which meant he knew more about what I might face than he'd let on. I pulled it out, checked the load. 1 shot. That was all I had. The lead drone was coming around again. This time, Thunder couldn't intercept. He was too far out of position, still recovering from his first pass. I waited, watched the drone close the distance, let it think it had me, let it commit to the attack vector, let it get so close I could see my own reflection in its sensor array. 50 feet, 40, 30. I aimed the flare gun at its air intake and fired. The flare hit dead center, buried itself in the jet engine intake. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the drone detonated. Not a catastrophic explosion, just enough to shred its turbine and send it tumbling toward Earth, trailing black smoke and broken pieces. 2 left. But I was out of ammunition, out of tricks, out of altitude. The ground was getting closer. I could make out individual buildings now, roads, cars, the real world rushing up to meet me whether I was ready or not. Thunder Lead made 1 more pass, his cannon roaring, trying to give me cover. But the drones had learned. They split up, coming at me from 2 angles simultaneously. I couldn't dodge both, couldn't survive both. I was going to die up here, just like I died 6 years ago, only this time there would be no faking it, no walking away,
This was how it ended. And then, cutting through the chaos and the wind and the sound of my own breathing, a new voice came over the emergency frequency. Cold, calm, carrying absolute authority. Shadow Strike units, this is Cardinal. Cease engagement. Repeat, cease engagement. Authorization code Darkstar 79er. Execute immediate return to base. The drone stopped, just froze in midair, hanging motionless like someone had hit a pause button on reality. Then, as smoothly as they'd attacked, they broke off, climbed, disappeared into the clouds.
I hung in my parachute harness, shaking, unable to believe what I just heard.
That authorization code. I'd only heard one person use that code before, someone I thought was dead, someone who'd been killed in the same incident that supposedly killed me, someone who apparently wasn't dead at all. The ground was 30 seconds away. I could see the landing zone now, an open field, brown and empty, ringed by trees.
Alex, you did it. You saved them. Now concentrate on landing. Don't break your legs after all that. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. Instead, I just said, copy, and prepared for impact. The earth hit hard. I rolled, absorbed the shock, popped the chute release, lay in the grass for a long moment, staring up at the sky, watching the commercial aircraft grow smaller in the distance. They were safe, all of them, because I'd jumped, because I'd fought, because for 6 years I'd pretended to be someone else, but when it mattered, I'd remembered who I really was. My radio crackled one more time. "Reaper?" said that cold, calm voice. "Welcome back. We need to talk." And I knew, lying there in that field, with adrenaline fading and reality setting in, that my 6 years of hiding were over.
Whatever came next, whoever Cardinal was, whatever this meant, there was no running from it anymore. I was Reaper again, whether I wanted to be or not. I lay in that field for maybe 30 seconds before I heard the helicopters. Not the heavy, thunderous sound of military Chinooks or Blackhawks, something lighter, faster, private contractor birds, the kind that don't show up on civilian radar and don't file flight plans anyone can trace.
3 of them dropped out of the sky in tight formation, kicking up dust and dead grass. They touched down in a triangle pattern around me, tactical positioning, designed to cover all angles and leave no escape route. The doors slid open before the skids fully settled. Men poured out. Not soldiers, at least not in uniform, but everything about the way they moved, the way they held their weapons, the way they established a perimeter told me exactly what they were. Private military contractors, the kind that work for people who operate in shadows and answer to no government. One figure stepped out of the lead helicopter, walked toward me with measured steps, alone, unarmed, hands visible. Even before I saw the face, I knew who it was. Colonel Marcus Webb, call sign Cardinal. My former commanding officer. The man who'd recruited me into Shadow Strike. The man who died in a helicopter crash in Syria 4 years ago, during a covert operation that officially never happened. Except he hadn't died. He was standing right in front of me, looking exactly the same, maybe grayer at the temples, maybe harder around the eyes, but unmistakably alive. "Hello, Reaper," he said. His voice carried that same flat calm I remembered, the voice that never rose in anger or fear, that delivered orders and bad news with equal steadiness. Been a long time. I sat up slowly, unclipping the parachute harness, watching him and his contractors with eyes that had spent 6 years learning to spot threats in normal-looking situations. "You were dead. So were you." He smiled slightly. It didn't reach his eyes. Turns out, being dead is useful sometimes. "Who sent those drones?" I asked. My voice came out rougher than I intended. 6 years of not using my command voice, and it showed.
Someone who doesn't want Shadow Strike to stay buried. Webb gestured to his men. They lowered their weapons, but didn't move. Someone who reactivated the AI protocols we shut down. Someone who figured out that the only way to teach those systems to hunt was to give them a target they already knew. He looked at me directly. You.
I got to my feet. My legs were shaking, from adrenaline, from the jump, from everything. Why me? Because you were the best pilot in the program. The drones learned from you more than anyone else. Your flight patterns, your decision-making, your instincts. Webb took a step closer. They didn't just study how you flew, Alex. They learned how you think. And someone figured out that the fastest way to weaponize that knowledge was to activate their hunting protocols using your signature as the trigger.
Who? I demanded. Who did this?
Someone inside the Department of Defense. Someone with access to black budget programs. Someone who believes the future of aerial combat is removing the human element entirely. He paused. Someone who needs you dead, because you're the only person who knows enough about Shadow Strike to expose what they're planning.
I stared at him, processing, connecting dots. You faked your death to investigate this.
I faked my death to survive it, Webb corrected. 4 years ago, I started noticing irregularities in the Shadow Strike decommissioning. Equipment that should have been destroyed was missing. Code that should have been wiped was backed up. When I asked questions, people I trusted started dying in accidents that weren't accidents. He met my eyes. So I disappeared, went off-grid, started building my own network, tracking the leaks, following the money, trying to figure out who was stealing our work and why.
And then someone reactivated my dog tag signal, I said.
Exactly. They must have found your chip in the archives. Didn't know you were still alive. They thought they were just testing the system. But the moment that signal went active, every Shadow Strike unit still operational locked onto it. Webb's expression darkened. You weren't supposed to survive. None of those passengers were supposed to survive. It was meant to look like a tragic accident, a commercial airliner colliding with military escorts during a routine training exercise.
200 people? I whispered. They were going to kill 200 people just to field test their drones?
Acceptable losses, Webb said bitterly. That's what the report would have said. Tragic, but unavoidable. And meanwhile, they would have proven their weapons work perfectly. He gestured toward the sky. But then you did something they didn't predict. You revealed yourself. You took command. You saved that F-16 pilot and then sacrificed yourself to draw the drones away. You called them off, I said. How? Because I've spent 4 years building backdoors into every system they stole from us. Emergency override codes they don't know I have. He smiled grimly. They think they control Shadow Strike. They don't. I do. For now.
What do you want from me, Cardinal?
I want you to help me finish what we started. Webb pulled a tablet from inside his jacket, showed me a screen filled with data I recognized. Flight telemetry, AI learning algorithms, tactical pattern analysis. There are 17 Shadow Strike units still operational. The ones you saw today were just 3 of them. The rest are being deployed around the world, sold to the highest bidder, turned into weapons no one can trace back to the United States.
He swiped to another screen. Photos of wreckage, crash sites, bodies. 6 accidents in the last 18 months. A commercial helicopter in Venezuela, a cargo plane in Kazakhstan, a military transport in the Philippines. All of them went down under mysterious circumstances. All of them carried people who were investigating illegal weapons programs.
Shadow Strike units, I said.
Shadow Strike units. Hunting and killing anyone who gets too close to the truth. Webb closed the tablet. I can shut them down. I have the codes. But I need 2 things. First, I need proof. Hard evidence that connects these crashes to the people who authorized them. Evidence that will hold up in a congressional investigation.
And second? I need someone those drones will follow willingly, someone whose command authority is still coded into their core programming, someone they were taught to trust and obey. He met my eyes. I need Reaper. I turned away, looked at the sky, where that commercial aircraft had been minutes ago, where 200 people were continuing their journey, unaware of how close they'd come to never landing. I walked away from this, I said quietly. 6 years ago, I watched Shadow Strike turn into something we never intended. I watched good technology become a weapon that scared even the people who built it. And when they asked me to keep pushing, to keep teaching those systems to be more aggressive, more independent, more lethal, I shook my head. I said no. I resigned, and they couldn't let that stand.
So they killed you, Webb said.
They tried to. Rigged an accident during what was supposed to be my final training flight. A controlled crash that would look like pilot error. But I survived. Barely. Walked away from the wreckage before anyone could confirm I was dead. And I decided that if they wanted me gone that badly, I'd stay gone.
You built a new life. I tried to. I turned back to face him. I changed my name, got a cheap apartment, found work that didn't require background checks, spent 6 years being as invisible as possible. And you know what? It was working. I was actually starting to believe I could be someone else, someone normal. But you're not someone else, Webb said. You're Captain Alexandra Brennan, call sign Reaper, the pilot who flew the Dark Star prototype through a hydraulic failure that should have killed you, who set 13 training records that still haven't been broken, who taught an entire generation of combat aviators how to stay alive when the systems fail and the sky turns against them. That was a long time ago. That was 35,000 feet ago, 2 hours ago, when you grabbed that radio and talked a scared kid through a crisis that would have killed him otherwise. Webb stepped closer. You can hide from a lot of things, Alex, but you can't hide from who you are. Today proved that. I closed my eyes, felt the truth of it settling into my bones. He was right. I'd spent 6 years pretending, playing a role, being someone smaller and quieter and safer than the person I really was. And the moment a crisis hit, the moment lives were on the line, all that pretense had fallen away like ash. I'd become Reaper again without even thinking about it, because that's who I'd always been, who I'd always be. If I do this, I said slowly, if I help you shut down Shadow Strike and expose whoever's behind it, I can't go back. There's no more hiding after this, no more being invisible. No, Webb agreed, there's not. They'll come after me, officially this time. Court-martial, prison, or worse. Maybe, or maybe we get enough evidence to flip the script, to make them the criminals and us the whistleblowers. Webb held out his hand. I can't promise you safety, Alex. I can't promise you won't regret this. But I can promise you one thing. You'll be fighting for something that matters. You'll be the person you were trained to be, the person you should have been allowed to be all along. I looked at his hand, at the contractors watching us, at the helicopters waiting, at the choice I'd been avoiding for 6 years. Safety or purpose, hiding or fighting, being dead or being alive. It wasn't really a choice at all. I took his hand, shook it once, firm and sure. All right, Cardinal, I said, let's go hunting. The next 72 hours were a blur of briefings and planning and reconnaissance. Webb had a base of operations, an old Cold War listening station in Montana that officially didn't exist anymore. From there, he'd been running his shadow investigation, tracking Shadow Strike units, identifying the people profiting from their illegal deployment. His team was small but lethal, former special forces, retired intelligence operatives,
a handful of pilots who'd worked with me back in the program and had refused to believe I was actually dead. Thunderlead was there. His real name was Colonel David Chen, and seeing him on the ground, out of his A-10, in civilian clothes, looking older and more tired than I remembered, hit me harder than I expected. "Reaper," he said when I walked into the briefing room. Just that, nothing else. But his eyes said everything. "I knew you weren't dead. I never stopped looking for you. I'm glad you're here."
We planned the operation like the military mission it was. Webb had located the main Shadow Strike control facility, a private research compound in Nevada disguised as a telecommunications hub. That's where the remaining 14 drones were being stored, tested, and prepared for sale to foreign buyers.
Our objective was simple: infiltrate the facility, download proof of the illegal program, and shut down the drones permanently. We had 48 hours before the next scheduled sale, an auction where 3 Shadow Strike units would be sold to a private military contractor with ties to authoritarian governments.
If those drones got out of the country, we'd never recover them, and more people would die in accidents no one could trace.
The infiltration plan was straightforward. I would go in alone, posing as a Department of Defense inspector conducting a surprise audit. My credentials were fake, but good enough to pass initial security. Once inside, I'd locate the server room, upload Webb's virus to shut down the drones, and extract the evidence we needed. Simple, except for the part where I'd be walking into a facility filled with people who wanted me dead, carrying equipment that would immediately trigger alarms if discovered, trying to shut down a weapon system that had already tried to kill me once. "You sure about this?" Thunder asked the night before the operation. We were alone on the roof of the listening station, looking at stars that seemed impossibly bright this far from city lights. "No," I admitted. "But when was the last time you were sure about anything in this job?" He smiled slightly. "Fair point." Then, more seriously, "We thought you died 6 years ago, you know? There was a memorial service. A lot of people spoke. I said you were the best pilot I'd ever flown with, that you made everyone around you better, that the sky was darker without you in it." My throat tightened. "You didn't believe I was dead?"
No, I didn't. He looked at me directly. "Because I knew you, and I knew you wouldn't go down in some random training accident. You were too good, too careful. So I started asking questions, got shut down, got threatened, got reassigned to a desk job in Colorado that was obviously meant to keep me quiet." He paused. "But I never stopped believing you were out there somewhere."
"Why didn't you look for me?" "I did, for 2 years, but you covered your tracks too well, and eventually I figured maybe you had your reasons for staying hidden. Maybe the best thing I could do was respect that, let you be whoever you needed to be." "Thank you," I said quietly, "for that, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself."
"You always believed in yourself, Reaper. You just forgot for a while." He handed me something, a patch, the old squadron insignia from our Shadow Strike days, a black bird with red eyes against a gray sky. "Figured you might want this for tomorrow." I turned it over in my hands, felt the weight of memory and identity sewn into fabric. Thunder, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Right now, you focus on the mission. Get in, get the evidence, get out. Let us handle everything else." He squeezed my shoulder once. "You saved my life more times than I can count. Let me return the favor." The Nevada facility looked exactly like what it pretended to be, a boring telecommunications building surrounded by chain-link fencing and minimal security. No armed guards, no military vehicles, just a few cameras and a single checkpoint. That's how you knew it was dangerous. The places that look innocuous are always the ones hiding the worst secrets. I walked up to the checkpoint in a business suit, carrying a briefcase full of fake inspection documents and very real hacking equipment. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. 6 years away hadn't erased my training. It had just been sleeping.
DOD inspector, I said to the guard, showing my credentials. Unannounced audit of your research systems. The guard, middle-aged, bored, clearly not expecting trouble, scanned my badge and ID, ran them through his computer, frowned slightly, made a phone call. This was the moment it could all fall apart. If Webb's hackers hadn't done their job right, if the credentials didn't check out, if someone inside recognized my face. The guard hung up, handed back my documents. You're clear. Someone will escort you inside. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding.
The interior was sterile and corporate. White walls, fluorescent lighting, people in business casual clothing who could have worked for any tech company in Silicon Valley. Nothing suggesting this was a military research facility developing autonomous kill drones.
My escort, a nervous young man with a tablet and an employee badge that said Visitor Coordinator, led me through corridors and security doors, chatting about company policy and audit procedures. I smiled and nodded and asked bland questions, while my eyes tracked every camera angle, every exit route, every potential obstacle.
The server room was exactly where Webb's intelligence said it would be, 4th floor, east wing, behind a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. I'll need access to your data systems, I told my escort. Standard compliance check. Oh, I'm not sure I have clearance for. Then get someone who does. I let a hint of impatience creep into my voice. I have 6 more facilities to audit this week. I don't have time for bureaucratic delays. He scurried off. I used the moment to plug a small device, no bigger than a USB drive, into a wall port. Webb had called it a network sniffer. It would map the facility's entire computer system and give his team remote access once I activated the virus. 5 minutes later, a woman in a lab coat appeared. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, according to her badge, head of research and development. And judging by the way she looked at me, calculating, suspicious, too smart for comfort, someone who might actually be a problem. DOD inspector, she said flatly. Funny, we weren't notified about any scheduled audits. That's why they're called surprise audits, Doctor. I held her gaze. Now, are you going to give me access to your systems? Or do I need to call your Pentagon liaisons and ask why you're obstructing a federal investigation? For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she smiled. Cold, professional, dangerous. Follow me. She led me to a control room that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Banks of monitors displaying drone telemetry, 3D projections of flight packs, real-time data streaming from shadow strike units deployed around the world. And there, in the center of it all, a main terminal. The one Webb had told me about. The one with direct access to every drone in the system. What specifically are you auditing? Dr. Hendricks asked. Flight logs, training algorithms, authorization protocols. I set down my briefcase. Standard oversight to ensure compliance with international weapons treaties. We're a private research facility. We're not subject to. You receive DOD funding. That makes you subject to whatever oversight we decide is necessary. I pulled out the fake tablet loaded with Webb's hacking software. This will only take a few minutes. Dr. Hendricks watched me carefully. Too carefully. You look familiar. Have we met? My blood went cold. I doubt it. I work out of Washington. This is my first time in Nevada. No, I'm sure I recognize you from somewhere. She stepped closer. Your face. Something about your eyes. Behind me, I heard the door lock click. Soft, deliberate. You were in the original Shadow Strike program, Dr. Hendricks said quietly. I reviewed all the personnel files when I took over the project. Captain Alexandra Brennan, call sign Reaper. Her expression shifted from suspicious to triumphant. You're supposed to be dead. I didn't run, didn't panic. Just stood there, feeling the trap close around me, calculating my options, and finding all of them bad. I don't know what you're talking about, I said evenly. Security,
Dr. Hendricks called. Not loudly, just loud enough. "We have an intruder in the control room." The door opened. 2 armed guards entered. Not rent-a-cops, professionals. The kind that shoot first and file reports later.
"She's not an inspector," Dr. Hendricks continued. "She's Captain Brennan, the original Shadow Strike pilot. Apparently, someone didn't do their job properly 6 years ago." She looked at me with something like scientific curiosity. "Tell me, how does it feel, knowing that everything you taught those systems is being used exactly the way you tried to prevent?"
"It feels," I said quietly, "like I made a mistake, walking away instead of burning this place to the ground when I had the chance." Dr. Hendricks laughed. "You don't have any chances left. No backup, no weapons, no way out." She nodded to the guards. "Take her to holding and notify our clients that we have something special for the auction tomorrow. The pilot who created Shadow Strike, delivered alive and compliant. That should fetch your premium price." The guards moved toward me. I let them. Didn't resist. Kept my hands visible. Played the role of defeated captive. Right up until I activated the device in my pocket. The one Webb had given me. The one with the emergency override codes. The one that sent a signal to every Shadow Strike drone in the facility. And then I spoke, clear and loud, using the voice I'd spent 6 years trying to forget. "Shadow Strike Network. This is Captain Alexandra Brennan, Reaper. Authorization code Darkstar 79er. Execute protocol Eagle Strike." The room went silent. Dr. Hendricks stared at me. The guards hesitated. Then every screen in the control room went red.
"What did you do?" Dr. Hendricks whispered.
"I taught those drones to follow my orders," I said. "And the one order I programmed deeper than any other was this. If I ever gave the Eagle Strike protocol, they were to shut down permanently. No restart, no recovery. Total system termination." Outside through the window, I could see the hangar doors opening. The Shadow Strike drones were activating, not to hunt, but to end. One by one, their systems began cascade failures. Controlled, irreversible, final. Dr. Hendricks lunged for the terminal, trying to override my override. But it was too late. The code was already executing. The drones were already dying. And then, the real backup arrived. Thunder's A-10 Warthog roared over the facility, so low that the building shook. Through the windows, I could see 3 more aircraft, F-16s by the sound, establishing a perimeter. Military vehicles poured through the front gate. Not contractors, not private security, actual U.S. military, led by Webb in full colonel's uniform, carrying federal arrest warrants. The guards dropped their weapons. Smart choice. Dr. Hendricks just stared at the screens as her life's work disintegrated into code and scrap metal. "You destroyed them. All of them." "Yes," I said. "I did. Do you have any idea how much those were worth? How much research went into?" "I don't care." I stepped closer to her. "You took something meant to save pilots' lives and turned it into a weapon for profit. You killed innocent people. You hunted me, hunted us because we knew the truth." I pulled out the recording device that had been running since I entered the building. "And now I have everything. Every word you said, every order you gave, every admission of guilt." Webb entered the control room with a team of federal agents. "Dr. Sarah Hendricks, you're under arrest for illegal weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other charges we're still counting up." He smiled slightly. "Reaper, nice work." "Thanks, Cardinal." I turned back to Dr. Hendricks as the agents put her in handcuffs. For what it's worth, the drones were never the problem. The problem was people like you who thought technology could replace human judgment, who thought the future of warfare was removing conscience from killing. I shook my head.
You were wrong. And now the world knows it.
The fallout took months. Congressional investigations, military tribunals, media coverage that turned Shadow Strike into a national scandal, and me into an unwilling symbol of whistleblower courage. I testified, told the truth, showed the evidence, watched careers end and indictments multiply, watched the Pentagon scramble to distance itself from a program it had secretly funded, watched defense contractors who'd been salivating over autonomous weapons suddenly claim they'd never supported such things. Through it all, Webb stood beside me, Thunder too, and slowly, grudgingly, the official narrative changed. We weren't traitors, we weren't rogue agents. We were the people who'd prevented a catastrophe, who'd stopped America from becoming the nation that sold AI assassins to the highest bidder. The court-martial I'd been expecting never came. Instead, I got a quiet pardon, an honorable discharge, and a letter from the Secretary of Defense thanking me for my service. It was politician speak for please go away and never talk about this again, but I didn't care. I was free. Actually free. Not hiding free. Not pretending free. Free to be Alexandra Brennan without looking over my shoulder.
I stood on the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base 6 months after everything ended, watching the sunset over the desert. The same desert where I'd first learned to fly, where I'd first heard the call sign Reaper, where I'd first understood that being a pilot meant carrying lives in your hands and bearing the weight when you couldn't save them all. Thunder found me there. He'd been reinstated to active duty, promoted to full colonel, given command of an A-10 squadron. Back where he belonged. Heard you turned down the Air Force's offer, he said, coming to stand beside me. They'd wanted me back. Full reinstatement. Return to test pilot status. A second chance to serve. I did, I confirmed. Why?
Because I've spent enough of my life proving I deserve to be in the sky. Now I want to help other people find their sky. I looked at him. I'm starting a civilian flight school, training commercial pilots, teaching the kind of emergency procedures that saved Viper 2's life, making sure the next generation knows how to stay alive when everything goes wrong. Thunder smiled. That's good. Really good. He handed me something, a small box, wrapped simply. This is from all of us. Everyone you flew with, everyone you trained, everyone whose life you saved at some point. I opened it. Inside was a new dog tag. Same silver, same golden wings. But instead of my old rank and call sign, it said something different.
Captain A. Brennan. Reaper. Some heroes fly in the sky. Some heroes bring the sky to Earth.
Thunder, You don't have to say anything. You just have to wear it. And remember that you're not defined by who you were. You're defined by who you choose to be. He squeezed my shoulder. And you chose right. Every time it mattered, you chose right.
After he left, I stood there alone, watching the last light fade from the sky, feeling the weight of the dog tag in my hand, feeling the weight of 6 years lifting from my shoulders. I'd been Reaper once, the pilot who taught machines how to think like warriors, who pushed boundaries and broke records and earned respect in a world that didn't give it easily. Then I'd been Alex, the woman in hiding, the ghost who pretended she'd never flown, never fought, never mattered. Now I was something else, someone new, someone who'd taken the best parts of both identities and forged them into something stronger. I was Alexandra Brennan, pilot, teacher, survivor, the woman who'd saved 200 lives by jumping out of an airplane, who'd destroyed the weapons she'd helped create, who'd chosen truth over safety and purpose over hiding. I was the woman who'd been underestimated and written off and left for dead, and who'd proven that none of that mattered. That what mattered was what you did when the moment came,
how you chose to act when lives depended on it, who you decided to be when the world gave you permission to be nothing. 3 years later, I stood in front of a classroom at Brennan Aviation Academy, my school, my dream, my second chance, teaching 20 students the fundamentals of emergency flight procedures. The most important thing you'll ever learn, I told them, is that technology fails, systems break, protocols don't cover every situation. And when that happens, when you're alone in the cockpit with failing instruments and frightened passengers, the only thing that matters is whether you're prepared.
A young woman in the front row raised her hand. How do you prepare for something you've never experienced?
I smiled. You practice the impossible. You run scenarios that scare you. You train in conditions that make you uncomfortable. Because the day something goes wrong, and eventually something will go wrong, you want your instincts to take over. You want your training to be so deep that you don't have to think. You just do.
Is that what you did? Another student asked. When you saved that airliner? The story had become legend by now, exaggerated in some tellings, minimized in others, but always ending the same way. The pilot who jumped out of a plane to save 200 strangers. I did what anyone would have done, I said.
No, the young woman said quietly. You did what only you could have done, because you were prepared, because you'd spent your whole life learning how to be ready for that exact moment. I looked at her for a long moment, saw in her eyes the same hunger I'd once felt, the desire to be great, to matter, to fly not just with skill, but with purpose. Then let me teach you, I said. Let me show you how to be ready, how to be the person who saves lives instead of the person who watches them end, how to be the pilot who makes the hard choice and lives with the consequences.
And I did, day after day, year after year, teaching not just technique, but courage, not just procedures, but judgment, not just flying, but living. Because that's what it meant to be Reaper. Not to be the best, not to have the most kills or the highest scores or the most impressive record. It meant being the person who showed up when it mattered, who chose to act when others froze, who remembered that behind every call sign and every statistic and every mission report were human lives worth saving. It meant carrying the sky in your hands and refusing to let it fall. And if there's one thing I learned from 6 years of hiding and 1 day of fighting, it's that you don't get to choose when your moment comes. You only get to choose whether you're ready when it does. So be ready, train hard, stay humble, and when your sky starts falling, remember, somewhere out there, someone once jumped from 35,000 feet with nothing but a parachute and a flare gun, because 200 lives mattered more than safety. And if she could do that, then you can face whatever impossible situation you're dreading. You can be brave enough, strong enough, ready enough. You can be your own Reaper. If this story moved you, if it made you think about courage and sacrifice, and what it means to step up when everything's on the line, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us about a time you did something impossible because someone needed you to. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this. Stories of ordinary people who became extraordinary when the moment demanded it. Stories that remind us that heroes aren't born wearing capes. They're born in cockpits and classrooms and cubicles, and they become heroes the moment they decide that someone else's life matters more than their fear. Until next time, stay strong, stay prepared, and never forget that your moment is coming. The only question is, will you be ready?